In the heart of a quiet Midwestern town, the local McDonald's was more than just a fast food restaurant. It was a cornerstone of the community. The building's bright red and yellow arches stood as a beacon for first responders and townsfolk alike. For police officers, firefighters, and paramedics, it was their haven during hectic shifts. The chatter of co-workers, the smell of fresh fries, and the clatter of trays provided a comforting backdrop to their brief moments of respite. That day started like any other. The lunchtime rush had fizzled out, leaving the restaurant with a calm buzz of casual conversations. A group of EMTs sat at their usual corner booth, exchanging stories about the morning's calls. Across from them, firefighters from the local station laughed over anecdotes from their latest training drills. At the counter, Jenna, a young paramedic with bright eyes and an even brighter smile, bantered with Greg, a tall firefighter who always seemed to be the center of attention. "Greg, if you complain about the coffee one more time, I'm replacing it with decaf," Jenna teased, her voice playful. "Decaf? That's a crime, and you know it," Greg shot back, mock horror on his face. The room erupted in light-hearted laughter, a brief reprieve from the weight of their demanding jobs. Suddenly, the bell above the entrance chimed, signaling a new customer. At first, no one paid much attention. It was just another day in the small town. But then, heads began to turn, and the air shifted. A tall man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans walked in, his confident stride unmistakable. For a moment, the restaurant seemed frozen in time. "Wait, is that?" Jenna whispered, leaning toward Greg. "No way," Greg replied, squinting. "What would he be doing here?" The man at the counter wasn't just anyone. It was Elon Musk, one of the most recognizable figures in the world. The billionaire behind Tesla, SpaceX, and countless innovations, he seemed entirely out of place in their modest McDonald's. Yet, there he stood, scanning the menu as casually as any other customer. Elon's presence sent a ripple through the room. Whispers filled the air as first responders exchanged stunned glances. Jenna couldn't help but chuckle at Greg's wide-eyed disbelief. "Think he's here to launch a rocket in the parking lot?" Jenna joked. Before Greg could reply, Elon stepped up to the counter. The cashier, a teenager named Maddie, looked like she'd seen a ghost. She fumbled with the register as Elon smiled warmly. "I'll take a quarter-pounder with cheese, large fries, and a Coke," he said in a tone so casual it felt surreal. Maddie nodded quickly, her hands trembling as she punched in the order. "That'll be $8.47, she said, her voice barely audible. With a mischievous grin, Elon added, "Do you accept Dogecoin?" Maddie blinked, momentarily confused before catching the joke. She let out a nervous laugh, shaking her head. Just credit cards." Elon chuckled, handing over his card. "Fair enough." As he moved to the side to wait for his order, the room seemed to collectively exhale. Conversations resumed, but now with a new energy. Phones discreetly snapped photos, and murmurs of, "Is it really him?" echoed through the space. Greg leaned toward Jenna, whispering, "Should we go talk to him?" Jenna hesitated. "I mean, what do you even say to someone like Elon Musk?" Greg shrugged. "I don't know, but we might not get another chance." Summoning his courage, Greg stood and walked over to Elon's table. The billionaire was scrolling through his phone, seemingly unfazed by the attention. Greg cleared his throat. Excuse me, Mr. Musk?" he began, his voice tinged with nervousness. Elon looked up, a welcoming smile on his face. "Yes?" "What brings you to our little town?" Greg asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Elon leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "Well, I've been on the road a lot lately. Sometimes you just need a good burger, you know?" Greg chuckled. "Can't argue with that. So, no plans to build a SpaceX facility in our backyard?" Elon laughed lightly. "Not yet, but hey, you never know." As their conversation continued, more first responders gathered around. The initial awkwardness faded, replaced by genuine curiosity. They asked him about his work, his vision for the future, and even his thoughts on McDonald's fries. Elon answered each question with surprising humility. "You know," he said at one point, It's easy to get caught up in the big picture. Mars missions, electric cars, AI. But days like this remind me that the little things matter too, like burgers and fries. As Elon's words settled in, the crowd around him seemed to relax even more. First responders, who were usually laser-focused on their duties, now found themselves engaged in a surprisingly casual conversation with one of the most influential figures in the world. Jenna, who had been watching from her corner, finally worked up the courage to join in. She approached with a hesitant smile, holding her coffee cup like a shield. "So, Mr. Musk," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "do you ever stop and think about how your work impacts people like us? I mean, first responders rely on technology every day, radios, vehicles, even the software that helps us navigate to emergencies. It feels like you're shaping the tools we'll use in the future." Elon tilted his head, his gaze sharpening with interest. "That's a great question," he said, setting down his Coke. "Honestly, I spend so much time thinking about the future, Mars, AI, sustainable energy, that I sometimes forget how it connects to the present. But you're right. The technology we create doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's only valuable if it helps people, especially those like you who are out there saving lives." His words hung in the air, carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. The room grew quiet as everyone leaned in, captivated by the shift in tone. It wasn't every day that a billionaire paused to reflect on how his innovations intersected with the lives of everyday heroes. "I guess what I'm trying to say," Elon continued, his voice softer now, "is that people like you inspire me. You're on the front lines, facing challenges most of us can't even imagine. If my work can make your jobs even a little bit easier or safer, then that's a goal worth chasing." Jenna nodded, her smile growing. "It's good to know that someone like you cares about what happens on the ground, not just up in the stars." Elon smiled back, and for a moment, it felt like the billionaire and the paramedic were just two people sharing an honest conversation. The lighthearted mood returned as Greg, never one to stay serious for too long, asked, "So, Elon, any plans to open a Tesla drive-thru? I mean, electric fast food sounds like the next big thing." The room erupted in laughter, and Elon played along. "You know, I've actually thought about it. Imagine charging your car while grabbing a burger. It's efficient. Maybe we'll call it McTesla." The crowd laughed even harder, the sound echoing through the small restaurant. But the levity didn't last long. A firefighter named Paul, older and quieter than the rest, stepped forward. His voice carried a different tone, one that immediately commanded attention. "Mr. Musk," Paul began, his hands resting on his belt, "I've been doing this job for 25 years. I've seen technology evolve, from radios the size of bricks to drones that help us scout fires. But there's one thing that never changes: the risks we take. Do you think the work you're doing could ever eliminate those risks? Or are we always going to be the ones running into the flames?" The room fell silent. Even Greg, who rarely took anything seriously, looked thoughtful. Paul's question wasn't just about technology. It was about the human cost of progress. Elon's expression shifted. Gone was the casual demeanor. In its place was a man clearly grappling with the weight of the question. "Paul," he began, his voice steady but reflective, "I don't think there will ever be a day when technology can replace courage. What you and your team do, putting yourselves in danger to save others, that's something no machine could replicate. But I do believe technology can help." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Imagine drones that can pinpoint hotspots in a fire, giving you real-time data before you even step inside. Or self-driving ambulances that can navigate through traffic faster than any human driver. These aren't just ideas. They're the kinds of tools I want to help create, not to replace you, but to support you." Paul nodded slowly, his tough exterior softening. "I appreciate that," he said. "It's good to know someone's thinking about how to keep us safer." The conversations continued, each question drawing out another layer of insight from Elon. He spoke about his vision for a sustainable future, his concerns about AI, and even his love for simple pleasures like burgers and fries. But just as the crowd thought the encounter couldn't get any more surprising, Elon stood up. "Listen," he said, his tone serious now, "I want to thank all of you, not just for your questions, but for the work you do every day. It's easy for people like me to talk about changing the world, but you're the ones actually out there doing it." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone. "There's something I can do right now," he added, typing quickly as the room watched in silence. "Consider it my way of saying thank you." When he looked up, his eyes met Jenna's. "I've just made a donation," he announced. "It's enough to cover brand new equipment for every fire station and police department in this area. Whatever you need, radios, vehicles, protective gear, it's yours." The room erupted in stunned silence, followed by a wave of emotion. Some first responders exchanged disbelieving glances, while others quietly wiped away tears. Jenna felt her throat tighten, her coffee forgotten as she stared at Elon in awe. "You didn't have to do that," she managed to say, her voice shaky, "but thank you." Elon smiled gently. "No, I didn't have to, but I wanted to. What you do matters, and if I can help, even in a small way, it's worth it." As Elon prepared to leave, the first responders lined up, not for autographs or selfies, but to shake his hand. Each one expressed their gratitude, not just for the donation, but for the respect he had shown them. Paul, the veteran firefighter, was the last to approach. "You know," he said, gripping Elon's hand firmly, "I've met a lot of people who talk about making a difference, but you actually did something. That means more than you'll ever know." Elon nodded, his expression sincere. "Thank you, Paul, and thank you for everything you've done." As the door closed behind him, the room buzzed with renewed energy. What had started as a routine lunch had turned into an unforgettable moment. A reminder that even the most unexpected encounters can leave a lasting impact. Jenna looked around at her colleagues, their faces glowing with hope and gratitude. "Well," she said, her voice breaking the silence, "I guess we should all order more fries. You never know who might walk through that door." The room erupted in laughter, the sound carrying a sense of unity that would linger long after Elon Musk's visit. As Elon Musk walked toward the door of the McDonald's, the energy in the room was almost palpable. Each step he took left an invisible ripple of inspiration behind. Jenna, standing near the counter, couldn't stop herself from calling out, "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the now quiet restaurant. He paused, turning to look at her with that same attentive expression he had worn all afternoon. "Thank you," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for what you did today, but for listening to us. It's easy to think people like you are so far removed from our lives, but today you showed us otherwise." Elon smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "Thank you, Jenna, for your courage, your kindness, and for doing what you do every day. People like you are why I believe the future can be better." The room was silent for a moment, everyone digesting the simplicity and sincerity of his words. It wasn't often that someone of his stature acknowledged their contributions with such humility. Jenna's fellow first responders clapped her on the shoulder, their pride in her evident. She glanced at Paul, who gave her a small nod of approval, his stoic demeanor softened by a glimmer of respect. After Elon left, the room remained abuzz with conversation. But the tone was different now, lighter, filled with a sense of possibility. Jenna noticed how her colleagues' laughter felt freer, their smiles wider. It was as if the weight of their daily struggles had momentarily lifted. "That was something else," Greg said, shaking his head as he leaned against the counter. "I mean, who would have thought the richest guy in the world could be so normal?" Jenna chuckled. "I think that's what made it so powerful. He didn't come in here to show off or make it about himself. He just wanted a burger and ended up giving us so much more." Paul, standing nearby, crossed his arms and nodded. "It's not just the donation," he said. "It's the fact that he actually saw us. Most people don't take the time." Jenna thought about Paul's words later that evening as she drove home. The donation was incredible, yes, but it was Elon's willingness to connect, to truly listen, that had left the biggest mark. For the first time in a while, she felt like her work wasn't just another job. It was part of something bigger, something deeply meaningful. In the days that followed, word of Elon Musk's unexpected visit spread like wildfire. The local news picked up the story, and soon it was being shared on social media, reaching millions of people. Photos of Elon sitting in the booth, chatting with the first responders and shaking hands with Paul went viral. The caption that accompanied many of the posts read, "Elon Musk thanks first responders in the most meaningful way possible." For Jenna, the attention was surreal. Reporters showed up at the fire station wanting to hear her perspective. At first, she felt overwhelmed by the spotlight, but as she spoke about the encounter, she realized it was an opportunity to share what truly mattered. It wasn't just about the donation, she told one reporter. It was about being seen, about someone taking the time to understand what we do and why it's important. That's what made the biggest difference. Back at the McDonald's, the booth where Elon had sat became something of a local landmark. Jenna often smiled when she saw customers pointing it out or taking photos, their excitement reminding her of that extraordinary day. But more than anything, she carried the memory of the encounter in her heart. It had been a reminder that even the smallest moments could lead to the biggest changes. And as she continued her work as a paramedic, she did so with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that what she did mattered, not just to the people she helped, but to the future they were all building together. In the end, the story wasn't just about Elon Musk or the donation. It was about connection, gratitude, and the realization that no matter who we are or what we do, we all have the power to make a difference.